If you use Claude Code seriously, you've probably built or installed a bunch of skills by now. And as an example, we are looking into my agentic operating system, where I have a lot of project skills for generating content with hyperframes, generating images, publishing content to social media, and a lot of other skills. And a lot of them are working quite well. But I also know that I have quite a few skills where I regularly update the content after executing the skill, which is an indication that the skill is not working that well. Because the reason for creating a skill is that you try to kind of put something that is repetitive into your skill so that you can execute it and then just consume the output. But if you do that and then you still have to tell Claude to change something, make it better, or it's not that what I actually wanted, then Claude Code isn't the issue, it's the skill because you have to optimize it. And instead of guessing into the white, which skill is performing bad, which skill am I constantly kind of correcting from the output, I decided to create another skill that will optimize my skills. And for that, I have a dashboard, which I can either use just as a simple HTML file, but it can be also served via the localhost in order to also write data back to kind of an inbox so that Claude can consume it and then help me also to improve my skills, but I will cover that in a bit. And for the different sections, we have recommendations. So I'm obviously kind of correcting the output from the skill hyperframes, recreate, brand context, optimizing skills a lot. So it makes sense to optimize these skills. And for the usage part, we have something that is extremely interesting because this plot here shows me kind of how often do I use a skill and how often am I also correcting the output. So anything that is in this corner here is something that you use a lot and you're most likely not satisfied with the output, which means optimizing any skill in this area will bring the biggest leverage, because if you optimize it, then you won't spend that much time anymore in optimizing the output afterwards. And you also won't spend the tokens anymore for that, which is at the end also money which you will save. But let's have a look into first the catalog. So kind of all my skills that were analyzed, personal skills, project skills, also from the plugin like superpowers. So I won't change them. The only thing that is important right now are either the personal skills or the project skills. And I also added some badges or filters for the most obvious stuff. Like if you're not using the front meta fields for passing arguments, or you're not specifying a model, because most people just create a skill. And the problem with that is they only use name and description. And let's say you have a really simple skill for humanizing or rewriting any type of content like an email. And if you start a session and then you use, for instance, Opus 4.8 or maybe even Fable, and then you execute the skill and you don't specify the model and effort, then it will inherit the configuration from your current session, which means you will eventually spend tokens for, let's say, rewriting an email by using a high effort, including, let's say, Fable. So it's definitely a good way to waste your tokens and also waste your money. And you can fix it easily. Instead, you can just use the front meta field. So name, description, you should always use that. But you can also add a model, effort, and as I also showed in the beginning, an argument hint, which is good for yourself. And that is also one of the first part that is analyzed and then eventually also optimized by the skills. So it will read the skill.md file and check the front meta and then check if you have specified the model and effort, which you should definitely do. And if we go back to the dashboard, then we can also see that we have here the studio. So for testing, I used, let's say, the upload post account. So it's a skill that used in the background the API from upload posts to retrieve data from my accounts. So just getting the ID when I uploaded something and so forth. So it's kind of a really easy task. And I also use Claude Code for generating the skill, which is fine, but I didn't really optimize it, which is definitely bad. But that's also the reason why we have here the argument hint. Who am I? So kind of an argument that I can pass to the API in order to figure out which account is currently selected. But it also suggested to use Haiku with a low effort, because at the end it just execute the script. So it does not need to think a lot and there's nothing really complex, which means it makes sense to use a cheaper model. And what we have here on the left side is the current skill, and that would be the optimized version. So kind of a good way to figure out what will be changed. Only because Claude suggested to use, let's say now the model Haiku, doesn't mean it's a perfect idea. So you still have to use your own brain and then think, oh, does it make sense to use that specific model? And then you think about kind of the thing that is done by the skill. And in this example, it's extremely simple, so it makes sense. But let's say there's something really complex where now a lot of things will be changed for executing something, then getting data, analyzing it. Then of course you could also update that afterwards. And let's say you want to optimize a specific skill, then you could execute the skill first in your project. Then you would go to the usage part. And let's say like hyperframes create. So it's a bubble chart where the size of the bubble shows me how often do I use it. And I'm currently working a lot with hyperframes and I'm also correcting the skill a lot. So I can simply click on it and then it will open for me the current front matter, which is just name and description. And then we have also, it's a project skill. Model is inherited, which is not that good. But for development, okay, but let's say you are done with the development of the skill, then it makes sense to also set the model. Say I want to optimize this specific skill, then I could either and paste this here, go into a session and optimize it interactively Claude Code, or I would just click here the optimize skill button, which will then send something into an inbox, which will be picked up by the current Claude Code session. So this one is right now running on my localhost on the port 8800. So it was started by Claude Code because I also use Claude Code for optimizing the skills, which means I could now just click on the button, tell Claude that I want to optimize the skill, and then it will start with the work. And once it's finished, then it will pop up here. So every single skill we have here, I clicked on the optimize skill button. And let's say I'm happy with it, then I could just say apply to the real skill, and then Claude takes care of updating the real files. So the optimization of the skills that are not working properly is extremely easy, and really anyone can do it because you just have to click a few buttons and then eventually also use your brain and then check if it makes sense and then accept or decline the changes or update it. Let's have a look into how the data is gathered because we have also usage data. And for that, we do the following. We have two data sources. We have the session transcripts, which is in the .claude folder in your user directory under the project. And then you have kind of a JSON file, which includes more JSONs. So kind of the usage data. And then of course we collect all the skills from the personal directory. So it's also the user directory, project skills, plugin skills, and everything else. So we gather the data and then we merge it and then start with the kind of recommendation and optimization. And eventually we have two ways to consume the data, either as a simple HTML file, which is here. So it's not interactive. And when I want to optimize a skill, then I would go ahead and click on it and then copy this specific command here. Or we can also serve it directly live, which is this one here. So kind of an interface to the current Claude Code session, which allows us to send data back, which will be then consumed by Claude. So kind of the easier alternative to just sticking around to the terminal. And that's it actually. So two different ways of serving the dashboard. And for the optimization, as I said, we also have a look into the front matter. So the skill knows exactly which front matter fields do we have, which are important, and also based on the logic of the skill, because we have also the body, what does the skill actually do? We can recommend also a model, effort, and so forth. This is kind of the first way of optimizing your skills, but there's, in my opinion, a way that is definitely better, and it is to execute the optimized skills directly, because let's say I'm right now working on a specific skill. So as an example, I'm right now here also creating a new reel, and let's say I'm not happy with the output of the current output from the skill. Then I could simply go ahead and use the optimize skills skill. And the reason why it is better is because we have already the context. So let's say I execute the skill and then I say, no, you should do this or that, or remove that specific part. You didn't use the right color, not the right brand tone, and so forth. And then we have all the data in the session. So Claude can take the data, check what is currently written down in the skill file and what did you actually change. And then it can compare it and then eventually give you some really good recommendations on how to improve it. And that's actually how I monitor the usage of my skills. So with this specific plot here that I know, okay, instead of just accepting that the skill is not working properly and then updating the content or rerunning it, I try to always optimize my skills, since a skill is created for being more efficient, saving time, and kind of getting rid of repetitive work. But if you end up kind of correcting it over and over again, then it's just wasting tokens and also wasting time. And I personally don't want to waste my time that much. So which means also for me that when I analyze something and optimize something, then I always look first into this direction here, because these skills are frequently used and also often correct. And anything that is here that is kind of fine, maybe it shouldn't be even a skill, because I saw that I've created skills and then I just used them twice. So shouldn't be most likely not a skill. But optimizing alone everything that is in kind of this part is extremely valuable if you want to kind of be sustainable with your skills and also save your tokens, because setting the model and effort is extremely important, which will also allow you to kind of min-max your 5-hour limit, because if you use Haiku instead of Fable or Opus 4.8 for simple tasks, then you can get much more out of your subscription in total. That's it regarding the skill optimizer, and in case you want to use it as well. And right now I would also recommend to do it with the Fable 5 model, since it's still included in the subscription. Then you can find it within my community under skill optimizer, and then also here is the file. So you just have to download it and then unzip it, since it's just a simple skill, including a few Python files. That's it already regarding this video. In case you do have any questions, feel free to ask me, and